The alarm bells rang through every corridor of Nexus Prime. The massive space station shook as emergency lights flashed red across its metal walls. In the Great Council chamber, representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their seats, with fear written across their faces. Council Speaker Hyan Wu stood at the center podium, his hands shaking as he held the emergency message. His usually calm voice cracked as he spoke to the gathered aliens and humans. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "We have received a transmission that changes everything. The Vorthak have requested an audience with this council." The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates jumped from their seats, shouting in dozens of different languages. The insect-like Kithara clicked their sharp mandibles so fast it sounded like machine gun fire. Plant-based Florians began growing thorns along their green arms. Even the usually peaceful water-dwellers from Aquatica started flashing angry colors across their transparent skin. Ambassador Da Yun from the Centauri Federation grabbed her aide Taiho by the arm. Her face had gone completely white. "This cannot be happening," she whispered. "The Vorthak do not talk. They only kill and eat." Taiho pulled up files on his tablet with nervous fingers. 300 years of reports scrolled across the screen. Every single one told the same terrible story. Vorthak ships would appear without warning. They would attack colonies. They would take prisoners. No one ever came back alive. The creatures were nightmares made real. 12 feet tall with black armor covering their bodies, 4 arms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut through starship hulls, teeth like razors, eyes that glowed red in the dark. They were the monsters that parents used to scare children into behaving. Security Chief Jae-min stood at his post near the main doors. His hand rested on his weapon, though he knew it would be useless against a Vorthak. Nothing had ever stopped them before. Plasma cannons barely scratched their armor. Nuclear weapons only made them angry. "Sir," one of his security officers said, through the comm system. "The Vorthak ship is approaching Docking Bay 7. Our scanners show something strange." "What kind of strange?" Jamin asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "There are 2 life forms on that ship. One matches Vorthak biology, but the other—" The officer paused. "The other does not match anything in our database. It is smaller, bipedal, like humans. But the energy readings are completely different." Jamin felt his blood turn cold. A Vorthak with a prisoner. Or maybe something worse. Maybe they had created some new kind of weapon. Some hybrid creature designed to hunt and kill, even more efficiently. Back in the council chamber, young Minho was frantically searching through historical records. As the newest aide to the council, he had studied every first contact protocol. But there was no protocol for this. No one had ever successfully talked to a Vorthak before. Every attempt had ended in blood and screaming. Speaker Hyan Wu called out the representative from the Silicon Collective, his metallic voice ringing through the chamber. "We must evacuate immediately. This station cannot withstand a Vorthak assault." "Where would we run?" asked the Florian delegate, her leaf-like hair wilting with fear. "They have ships faster than anything we possess. They have weapons that can crack planets in half." The truth hung in the air like poison gas. There was nowhere to run. If the Vorthak wanted them dead, they would die. The only question was how long it would take and how much it would hurt. Hyunwoo looked around the chamber at faces filled with terror. These were some of the bravest beings in the galaxy. Diplomats who had negotiated peace between warring species, scientists who had explored black holes, military officers who had faced down pirates and raiders, but now they all looked like frightened children. "We cannot run," he said finally. "If we flee now, the Vorthak will know that fear controls us completely. We must face whatever comes with dignity." "Dignity will not stop their claws from tearing us apart," muttered Da-eun. The comm system crackled to life. Jamin's voice filled the chamber, tight with stress. "Council speaker, the Vorthak vessel has docked. They are requesting permission to enter the station." "Requesting permission?" Teho looked up from his tablet in confusion. "Since when do Vorthak request anything? They just take what they want." Hyun Woo felt a small spark of hope, though he tried not to let it grow too bright. Maybe this was different somehow. Maybe there was a chance for something other than death and destruction. "Grant them permission," he said, "but keep all security. Teams on high alert." "Sir, are you certain?" Jamin asked through the comm. "Once they are inside the station?" "Once they are inside, we will face whatever fate brings us," Hyun Woo replied. "We are diplomats. This is what we do." The chamber fell silent except for the sound of nervous breathing and the clicking of Cathara mandibles. Everyone stared at the main entrance doors. Behind those doors lay the corridor that led to Docking Bay 7. Soon, Death would walk through those doors on 4 legs, with claws ready to tear and teeth ready to bite. Minutes passed like hours. Da-Yun whispered prayers in her native language. The Silicon Collective representative ran diagnostic checks on his systems, preparing for whatever might come. The Florian delegate grew more thorns, her body's natural defense against predators. Then the doors began to open. The sound of metal sliding against metal echoed through the chamber like a death knell. Every being in the room held their breath. Some closed their eyes, unable to watch their approaching doom. Others stared with the morbid fascination of beings who knew they were about to witness their own destruction. Footsteps echoed from the corridor. Heavy footsteps that shook the floor with each impact. The footsteps of something massive and deadly approaching their sanctuary of peace and diplomacy. But there were other footsteps, too. Lighter ones, quicker ones. The footsteps of something much smaller walking alongside the monster. Hyun Woo gripped the podium so hard his knuckles turned white. Whatever was about to enter this chamber would change everything. He could feel it in his bones. The galaxy was about to learn something new about the creatures they feared most. The footsteps stopped just outside the chamber doors. For a moment, everything was completely quiet. Then the doors opened fully, and the impossible walked into their world. They expected a monster. Until they met the Predator's human partner. The chamber doors slid open completely, and what walked through shattered every expectation in the room. First came the monster they all feared. Kretok the Render stood 12 feet tall, his black armor gleaming under the chamber lights. 4 massive arms hung at his sides, each ending in claws that could slice through steel. His red eyes swept across the room, taking in every terrified face. Battle scars covered his carapace like a roadmap of violence. This was Death walking on 2 legs, but beside him walked something that made no sense at all. A human woman stepped through the doorway as if she was entering a coffee shop instead of a council chamber full of the galaxy's most important beings. She was small, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore plain explorer's clothing and carried a small translation device clipped to her shirt collar. What shocked everyone most was not that she was there. It was how comfortable she looked. Sujin walked beside the galaxy's most feared predator, like they were old friends taking a stroll through a park. There were no chains on her wrists, no collar around her neck, no signs that she was a prisoner or slave. She moved freely, easily, with the confidence of someone who felt completely safe. The chamber was so quiet that the air recycling systems sounded like thunder. Hyun Woo opened and closed his mouth several times, but no words came out. His brain could not process what his eyes were seeing. A human woman walking voluntarily next to a creature that had slaughtered entire colonies. Ambassador Da-Un rose slowly from her seat, her face pale with shock. What is this?" she whispered. Sujin smiled. It was a warm, genuine smile that seemed to light up her whole face. She looked around the chamber with the calm interest of a tourist visiting a new city. "Hello, everyone," she said, her voice clear and friendly through the translation system. "My name is Sujin, and this is my friend Kritok. We are here because there has been a massive misunderstanding for about 300 years, and it is time to clear things up." The word friend hit the chamber like a bomb blast. "Friend?" Da-Yun's voice cracked. "That thing is a monster. A killer. How can you call it your friend?" Several delegates began shouting at once. The Cathara representative clicked his mandibles so fast they sounded like breaking glass. The Florian delegate sprouted more defensive thorns. Even the peaceful water dwellers started flashing angry red colors. "She is clearly insane," called out the Silicon Collective representative. "The Vorthak must have damaged her mind somehow. Or she is infected with some kind of parasite," suggested the insect-like Kithara. "They are using her as a weapon against us." "This has to be a trap," shouted another voice from the crowd. "No human would willingly stand next to that creature." Through all the shouting and accusations, Sujin remained perfectly calm. She listened to each outburst with patience, like a teacher waiting for her students to finish arguing before starting the lesson. But what silenced everyone was what happened next. Sujin reached out and placed her small human hand on one of Kritok's massive armored arms. The gesture was so natural, so comfortable, that it stopped every voice in the room. It was the kind of touch people used with family members or close friends. Casual, familiar, completely without fear. Kritok looked down at her with his glowing red eyes, and those who were watching closely swore they saw something impossible in that alien gaze. Gentleness, affection, the way a father might look at a beloved daughter. "Actually," Sujin said into the stunned silence, "Kritok here is probably the gentlest soul I have ever met. He raises orchids in his spare time." The silence that followed was so complete that several beings wondered if they had gone deaf. Security. Chief Jae-min took a step forward, his hand still on his weapon. "This is impossible. We have 300 years of records. That species has never shown mercy. They have never taken prisoners. They kill and consume everything they encounter." Sujin nodded thoughtfully. "I understand why you would think that. The evidence does look pretty bad from your perspective, but you are missing some very important information." She looked up at Kritok and said something in a language that sounded like deep rumbles mixed with clicking sounds. The massive creature rumbled back, his four arms moving in what might have been gestures. "Kritok wants to speak to all of you," Sujin said. "He has been hoping for this chance for a very long time." Young aide Minho stared at his tablet screen in confusion. "The translation systems are picking up structured language patterns from the Vorthak, but that is impossible. Our records say they have no language. They only roar and growl." "Your records are wrong about a lot of things," Sujin replied gently. Kritok stepped forward, and every being in the chamber tensed for attack. But instead of violence, something incredible happened. The massive predator began to speak. His voice came through the translation system as deep and resonant, like distant thunder mixed with flowing water. But the words that emerged were not threats or demands for surrender. "Honored beings of the galaxy," the translation rendered his speech, "I greet you in peace and sorrow. I am Kritok of the Vorthak Collective, and I come before you with a heavy heart to speak of terrible misunderstandings that have brought pain to all our peoples." Ambassador Da-Un sank back into her chair as if her legs could no longer support her. It speaks. It actually speaks." "He speaks," Sujin corrected gently. "And he has been trying to speak to all of you for 3 centuries. The problem is that every time his people approach your ships or colonies, you start shooting before anyone can say hello." Taeho was frantically cross-referencing historical records on his tablet. Wait. If we look at the attack patterns, every Vorthak appearance corresponds with... Oh no. Oh no. What is it? Da-Yun demanded. Every Vorthak sighting matches up with reports of missing Vorthak individuals in that sector, Taeho said, his voice growing smaller with each word. What if they were not attacking? What if they were looking for their own people? Kritok rumbled something to Sujin, who nodded and translated. He says that is exactly right. 300 years ago, when your explorers first met, a Vorthak science vessel, your people opened fire immediately. They shot down the ship and captured the survivors for study. When rescue ships came looking for the missing scientists, you assumed they were raiders and fought them off. The chamber began to spin around Hyun-woo as the implications hit him. Every battle, he whispered. Every attack we recorded. They were rescue missions? Sujin's expression grew sad. Every single one. And every time they tried to save their people, more shooting started. After a while, they stopped trying to communicate and just focused on getting their families back home safely. The galaxy's 300-year war with the Vorthak had been based on a complete misunderstanding, and a small human woman with a gentle smile had just turned their entire universe upside down. They expected a monster, until they met the Predator's human partner. The weight of 3 centuries of misunderstanding pressed down on the council chamber like a heavy blanket. Ambassador Da-Un sat in her chair, staring at Kritok with new eyes. The creature she had feared her entire life was not a monster at all. He was just someone trying to save his people. Tell us everything, Hyun-woo said quietly. His voice sounded older than it had an hour ago. Tell us how this all began. Sujin looked around the chamber at the faces filled with shock and growing understanding. Then she began to speak, her voice steady and clear. I am a xenobiologist, she said. I study alien plant life on frontier worlds. 6 months ago, I was on Kepler 442b collecting fungal specimens when a storm hit. The worst storm that planet had seen in 50 years. She paused, remembering. I was trying to get back to my research station when I heard something that sounded like metal breaking. I followed the sound and found Kritok trapped under a fallen crystal tree. The tree was massive, and his armor was cracked. He was bleeding this blue fluid that I later learned was Vorthak blood. The chamber listened in complete silence. This was not the story they expected to hear. I could have run, Sujin continued. Any sane person would have run. Here was this 12-foot-tall creature with claws and armor, everything I had been taught to fear. But he was hurt, and he was alone. And the storm was getting worse. Taeho leaned forward in his seat. What did you do? I spent 6 hours digging. Him out, Sujin said simply. I used my field tools, some fallen branches, even my bare hands. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely see. Lightning was hitting the crystal formations all around us, but I could not just leave him there to die. She looked up at Kritok with obvious affection. He was conscious the whole time. He kept making these soft rumbling sounds that I thought were threats. I found out later he was trying to tell me to save myself and leave him. Kritok spoke, his deep voice translated for the chamber. Never before had I seen such kindness from a stranger. Here was this tiny soft skin risking her life in a deadly storm to help someone she had never met. Someone who looked like her worst nightmare. When I finally got him free, Sujin continued, 3 more Vorthak appeared. They had been looking for him. I thought I was about to die. But instead of attacking me, they were amazed. They kept pointing at me and talking rapidly among themselves. What were they saying? Asked Minho. They were saying that the legends were true, Sujin replied. They were saying that humans really were the small, fierce ones. Da-Yun blinked in confusion. The small, fierce ones? Kritok rumbled again, and Sujin translated. The Vorthak have been watching humanity for over 200 years. Not to hunt us, but to study us. They find us fascinating. Fascinating how? Asked the Florian delegate, her thorns slowly retracting. Because of our behavior patterns, Su-Jin explained. Vorthak scouts have observed human colonies from a distance for generations. They have watched us adopt stray animals that other species would kill as pests. They have seen us risk our lives to save people we do not even like. They have recorded humans jumping into dangerous situations to help complete strangers. She gestured around the chamber. To the Vorthak, humans are the galaxy's ultimate caregivers. We are beings so driven to nurture and protect that we will sacrifice ourselves for others without thinking twice about it. The Silicon Collective representative processed this information. You are saying they have been studying us like we might. Study an interesting new species? Exactly, Su-Jin said. But there was a problem. Every time they tried to make contact, humans would shoot first and ask questions later. So they have been waiting for decades, hoping that someday a human would give them a chance to explain. Security Chief Jae-min stepped forward. But what about the colonies that were attacked? What about the people who disappeared? Su-Jin's expression grew sad. Those were not attacks. They were mercy missions. The chamber erupted in confused voices, but Hyun-woo held up his hand for silence. Explain, he said. When Vorthak ships found human colonies that had been abandoned due to plague or disaster, they tried to help, Su-Jin said. But they found only bodies, so they performed what they believed were proper human funeral rites. Funeral rites? Dayun asked. Kritok spoke again, his voice heavy with sorrow. We studied your species for so long, but we did not understand your death customs. We thought that consuming the dead was how humans honored those who had passed. We believed we were giving your people the respect they deserved. The horrible truth sank into every mind in the chamber. The reports of Vorthak consuming human colonists were not acts of violence. They were acts of reverence performed by beings, trying to honor the dead according to what they thought were human traditions. We got it all wrong, whispered Minho. Everything we believed about them was wrong. Not everything, Su-Jin said. They really are incredibly dangerous. Their strength is beyond anything humans can imagine. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. If they wanted to conquer the galaxy, nothing could stop them. Then why haven't they? Asked the Cathara representative. Because that is not who they are, Su-Jin replied. Let me show you something. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small device. When she activated it, a holographic image appeared above her hand. It showed a delicate flower with petals that seemed to glow from within. This is a Terran orchid, she said. Kritok has been growing them for his daughter. She loves earth flowers. He has been hoping to meet humans peacefully for decades, ever since he learned that we were the ones who created such beautiful things. The image of the galaxy's most feared warrior. Tending a flower garden was almost too much for some delegates to process. His daughter? Dayun asked weakly. Shi'ara, Su-Jin said with a smile. She is 8 years old by human standards, and she is on the ship right now, hoping to meet the people who make such wonderful flowers. The revelation that the Vorthak had families, children who loved flowers, shattered the last remnants of the monster myth. Hyun-woo looked around the chamber at faces filled with wonder, shame, and hope. What do you want from us? He asked Kritok directly. The massive warrior's response was simple and devastating. We want to learn how to be like you, came the translation. We want to understand how such small beings can have such large hearts. They expected a monster, until they met the Predator's human partner. The revelation that the Vorthak wanted to learn from humanity hung in the air like a bridge waiting to be crossed. For several long minutes, nobody spoke. The idea was too large, too strange, too wonderful to grasp all at once. Finally, Minho raised his hand like a student in class. Could you tell us more about Vorthak society? What are they really like when they are not being shot at? Su-Jin smiled and pulled out a larger data device. I have been living with them for 6 months. Let me show you their world. The device projected holographic images that filled the center of the chamber. What the delegates saw took their breath away. Floating cities drifted through the clouds of gas-giant planets like delicate soap bubbles. But these were not crude structures built for war. They were works of art, their surfaces covered in intricate patterns that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. Vortex cities are grown, not built, Su-Jin explained. They use bioengineering techniques that make our best technology look like stone tools. Every building is alive, breathing, adapting to the needs of its inhabitants. The next image showed Vorthak children playing in what looked like a zero-gravity playground. They tumbled and spun through the air, their forearms allowing them to perform aerial dances that were both beautiful and joyful. Their children play games that would make human physicists weep with joy, Su-Jin continued. They learn mathematics by building sculptures in 11 dimensions. They study music by creating symphonies with gravitational waves. Ambassador Daon leaned forward, studying the images. They look so happy. They are happy, Su-Jin said. The Vorthak are natural, builders and creators. They find joy in making beautiful things that last for thousands of years. Their oldest structures are still growing and changing after 10 millennia. The next series of images showed elderly Vorthak engaged in what could only be described as teaching. But instead of standing at boards or using books, they moved their bodies in complex patterns while younger Vorthak watched and learned. Their elderly teach philosophy through interpretive movement, Su-Jin explained. Each gesture represents a concept. Each dance tells a story about the nature of existence. It is beautiful beyond words. Taeho was frantically taking notes on his tablet. But why do they look so frightening if they are peaceful? Kritok spoke, and Su-Jin translated. Evolution shaped them to survive on death worlds where even the plants try to kill you. Their armor protects against acid rain. Their claws are for climbing crystal mountains where metal tools would shatter. Their multiple arms are for working in zero-gravity environments where balance is impossible. Their appearance is purely functional, Su-Jin added, like a spacesuit or protective gear. Underneath all that armor, they are gentle souls who cry when flowers die. The Florian delegate, who had been silent for most of the session, finally spoke. You said they cry when flowers die? Kritok cried for 3 days when a solar flare killed his prize orchid collection, Su-Jin said. He said it was like losing old friends. Security Chief Jae-min, still struggling with the new reality, asked the question that bothered him most. But our records show that they consumed the bodies of colonists. How can you explain that? Su-Jin's expression grew sad again. That was the most tragic misunderstanding of all. When they found human colonies that had been wiped out by disease or disaster, they tried to honor the dead according to what they thought were human customs. She showed them another holographic image. This one depicted a solemn Vorthak ceremony where the massive beings moved in slow, respectful patterns around what appeared to be memorial stones. In Vorthak culture, when someone dies, their body is shared among the community as a way of keeping their memory alive forever. They thought they were giving human colonists the highest honor possible. They were trying to be respectful, whispered Da-Yun. They were trying to be kind, Su-Jin confirmed. They had studied humans for so long, but they misunderstood this one crucial aspect of our culture. Every act that looked like monster behavior to us was actually an attempt at compassion. The Cathara representative clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. If they have been watching us for so long, what else do they know about humanity? Su-Jin grinned. Oh, they know things about us that we do not even know about ourselves. She activated another series of images. These showed detailed sculptures of humans performing various acts of kindness. Humans rescuing animals from floods. Humans sharing food with strangers. Humans risking their lives to save people they had never met. They have been creating art about human compassion for centuries, Sujin said. Paintings, sculptures, epic poems written in bioluminescent ink. To them, humans are not just another species. We are legends. Legends? Asked Minho. Kreetalk spoke again, his translated voice filled with something that might have been awe. Your species does things that no other beings in the galaxy do. You adopt creatures that could kill you. You care for beings that cannot help you in return. You sacrifice your safety for abstract concepts like justice and kindness. They find us fascinating because we are the only species that consistently shows compassion to strangers, Sujin added. Even beings that look completely different from us. Even beings that could be dangerous. She gestured around the chamber. Look at this council. Dozens of different species working together for peace. That kind of cooperation is almost unheard of in the galaxy. Most species stay with their own kind. But humans? She shrugged. Humans collect friends like some people collect stamps. The Silicon Collective representative processed this. You are saying that our tendency to form alliances with other species is unusual? It is unprecedented, Sujin replied. The Vorthak have been studying galactic civilizations for millennia. They have never seen anything like human behavior. We are the only species that actively seeks out other forms of life to befriend and protect. But why? Asked the Florian delegate. That is what they want to learn from us, Sujin said. They want to understand how we maintain hope in dark times, how we find strength in helping others, how we can look at a stranger and see a potential friend instead of a potential threat. Hyunwoo felt something stir in his chest. Pride, maybe, or wonder. They want to learn human values? They want to learn human heart, Kreetalk's voice rumbled through the translator. Your species has something that we have never encountered before. Something that lets you care about beings you have never met. Something that drives you to sacrifice for others without expecting anything in return. Love, said Dayun quietly. They want to learn about love. Sujin nodded. Not romantic love. Universal love. The kind of love that makes a stranger risk her life to dig a trapped alien out of a crystal tree during a storm. The chamber fell silent as everyone contemplated this impossible situation. The galaxy's most feared predators wanted to learn compassion from the species they had been accidentally fighting for 3 centuries. There is more, Sujin said. Much more. But first, I think you should meet someone very special. They expected a monster. Until they met the predator's human partner. Before anyone could ask who they were about to meet, Sujin pulled out a small communication device and spoke into it, using the same rumbling language she used with Kreetalk. A moment later, the chamber doors opened again. What entered was impossible for a different reason than before. A young Vorthak walked into the chamber, and despite being only 8 feet tall, she still towered over most of the delegates. Her armor was a lighter shade of gray than her father's, and her red eyes held the curious brightness that belonged to children everywhere in the galaxy. But what made every being in the chamber gasp was what she carried in her 4 arms. Flowers. Dozens and dozens of flowers from worlds across the galaxy. Earth roses with their delicate red petals. Centauri dream blossoms that sparkled like stars. Florian sun petals that glowed with internal light. Even rare crystal flowers from the Silicon. Homeworld that chimed softly as she moved. Shiara moved with the careful grace of someone carrying precious treasures. She approached each delegation with the formal politeness of a well-raised child, offering flowers with all the ceremony of a diplomatic gift exchange. For you, she said to Ambassador Daun, her young voice translated by the same system. Papa says these are called roses. Are they beautiful enough? Dayun took the offered flowers with shaking hands. Tears began streaming down her face as she looked into the hopeful red eyes of a child who had been raised believing that humans were heroes from legend. They are perfect, Da-yun whispered. They are the most beautiful flowers I have ever seen. Shiara's entire body seemed to light up with joy. She moved to the next delegation, offering crystal flowers to the silicon representatives. These are from your homeworld, she told them. I grew them in Papa's garden. Do they sing the right songs? The metallic beings accepted the chiming flowers with something approaching reverence. They sing beautifully, young one. How did you learn to grow them? Papa taught me, Shiara replied proudly. He says every flower has its own language. You just have to listen very carefully. As she continued around the chamber, offering gifts to each delegation, the adults watched in stunned silence. This was not the offspring of a monster. This was a child who had been raised with love and care, taught to see beauty in the universe and to share that beauty with others. When she reached the Florian delegation, she paused and spoke in their own plant-based chemical language, releasing pheromones that translated as pure joy and friendship. The Florian delegate's remaining thorns retracted completely as she accepted the sun petals. She speaks our language, the Florian said in amazement. How is this possible? I wanted to talk to the flower people properly, Shiara explained. Papa says it is rude to speak to someone in a language they do not prefer. Young Min-ho was furiously cross-referencing data on his tablet when he made a discovery that shook him to his core. Speaker Hyun-woo, he called out, his voice tight, with excitement and disbelief. I have been analyzing our historical records against what we have learned today. The pattern goes back further than we thought. What pattern? Hyun-woo asked. Unexplained rescues, Min-ho replied, his fingers flying over his tablet. For the past century, there have been dozens of reports of ships in distress being mysteriously repaired and resupplied. The crews always reported that they woke up to find their problems solved with no idea who had helped them. Taeho leaned over to look at the data. You think the Vorthak were responsible? Cross-referencing the locations with known Vorthak sightings, Min-ho said. It matches perfectly. They have been secretly helping other species for decades. Soo-jin nodded. They call it the Silent Service. When they find ships in trouble, they repair them and provide supplies, then leave before the crews wake up. They learned early on that showing themselves would only cause panic and violence. Security Chief Jae-min stepped forward. Why would they help people who shoot at them? Kritok spoke, and his translated answer was simple and profound. All life is precious. Even those who misunderstand us deserve to live and grow. The philosophical implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. Here was a species that had endured 3 centuries of persecution and violence, yet they continued to show compassion to their persecutors. They have been our guardian angels, whispered Da-eun. All this time they have been protecting us from the shadows. Not just protecting, Soo-jin said. Teaching, learning, hoping. She activated her data device again, and this time the images showed something that made several delegates cry openly. Vorthak artists had created thousands of works depicting human acts of kindness. Paintings of human rescue workers saving earthquake victims. Sculptures of human doctors treating alien patients. Epic poems written in flowing script about human courage in the face of impossible odds. They have been creating a mythology about us, Soo-jin explained. To them, humans are not just another species. We are the proof that goodness exists in the universe. But we shoot them on sight, said the Cathara representative, his mandibles clicking with shame. Which only proves their point, Soo-jin replied. They see us as beings so driven to protect ourselves and others that we will fight against anything we perceive as a threat, even when that perception is wrong. Shiara finished distributing her flowers and returned to stand beside her father. She looked up at Kritok with obvious adoration, then around the chamber with the bright curiosity of childhood. Papa? She said in the rumbling Vorthak language, Are these the flower makers? Are these the small fierce ones from the stories? Kritok rumbled back, and Shiara clapped her 4 hands together with delight. "What did she ask?" Hyunwoo inquired. "She wanted to know if you were the humans from the stories her father tells her," Sujin translated. "The brave little beings who make beautiful things and help anyone in need." "What did he tell her?" asked Da-un. "He told her yes. He said, 'These are the heroes she has been hearing about her whole life.' The weight of being called heroes by the people they had been fighting hit every human in the chamber. They had spent centuries fearing the Vorthak, while the Vorthak had spent those same centuries admiring human compassion. 'We do not deserve to be called heroes,' Hyunwoo said quietly. 'That is exactly why you deserve it,' Kretok's translated voice replied. 'True heroes never believe they are heroic. They simply do what needs to be done because it is right.' Sujin looked around the chamber at faces filled with wonder, shame, hope, and growing understanding. 'There is something else,' she said. 'Something that will change everything if you are willing to listen.' 'We are listening,' said Da-un. 'We are finally listening.' The Vorthak do not want apologies or reparations for the centuries of misunderstanding," Sujin continued. "They want to help. Their technology, evolved for survival in impossible conditions, could solve many of the galaxy's problems." She activated another series of images. Bioengineering that could end food shortages, architectural techniques that could create cities capable of surviving any disaster, medical knowledge that could cure diseases you do not even have names for yet. "What do they want in return?" asked the Silicon Collective representative. Sujin smiled. "They want to learn from us. They want to understand how humans maintain hope in dark times, how we find strength in helping others, how we look at strangers and see potential friends instead of potential enemies. They want to learn how to have human hearts," she concluded. The chamber fell silent as the magnitude of what was being offered sank in. The galaxy's most advanced species wanted to trade their knowledge for human compassion. It was the most extraordinary bargain in the history of the universe. They expected a monster until they met the Predator's human partner. The vote was unanimous, not because it had to be, but because it could not be anything else. After 3 hours of testimony, evidence, and revelation, every single delegate in the chamber voted to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Vorthak Collective. The Silicon Collective representative had summed up the feelings of everyone present. "We have spent 3 centuries being wrong about everything. It is time to start being right." But the real change began in the small moments that followed. As the formal session ended, something extraordinary happened. Instead of the usual diplomatic rushing and political maneuvering, delegates began approaching Kretok and Shiara directly. Not as officials meeting with foreign dignitaries, but as people meeting new friends. Ambassador Da-un was the first. She walked up to the massive Vorthak warrior with her bouquet of roses still clutched in her hands. "I owe you an apology," she said, looking up into his glowing red eyes. "I have spent my whole life afraid of you. My people have spent generations teaching our children that you were monsters. We were wrong, and I am sorry." Kretok's response, translated through the now familiar system, was gentle and forgiving. "You could not apologize for not knowing what no one had ever told you. Fear of the unknown is natural. What matters is that you are willing to learn new truths." Young Minho approached Shiara with the enthusiasm of someone meeting a celebrity. "Could you really teach me how to grow crystal flowers? I have been trying for years, but they always shatter when I touch them." Shiara's eyes brightened with the joy of sharing knowledge. "Oh yes, the secret is to sing to them while they grow. Each crystal has its own favorite song. Would you like me to teach you?" As conversations bloomed around the chamber, Sujin found herself surrounded by delegates, asking questions, seeking guidance, trying to understand how this new relationship would work. "How do we begin?" asked the Florian representative. "How do we start building bridges after so much misunderstanding?" The same way any friendship begins, Sujin replied, with small acts of kindness and patience, with listening instead of assuming, with being willing to see past appearances to the heart underneath. Security Chief Jae-min approached more cautiously than the others. His training made it hard to simply accept that everything he had believed was wrong. "This is all wonderful," he said, "but I have to ask the hard questions. What guarantees do we have that this is not some elaborate deception? How do we know they will not use our trust against us?" Sujin understood his concerns. "You do not have guarantees," she said honestly. "But you have something better. You have proof." She gestured to Kritok, who was carefully examining one of the crystal flowers with the gentle attention of a true gardener. "Look at him," she said. "Really look. Does anything about his behavior suggest deception? Does anything about the way he treats his daughter, the way he tends his garden, the way he speaks about other species suggest that he is capable of the kind of elaborate cruelty you are worried about?" Jae-min watched as Kritok showed Shiara how to properly hold the fragile crystal flower so its song would not be disturbed. The massive warrior's claws, which could tear through starship hulls, moved with the delicacy of a surgeon performing life-saving surgery. "No," Jae-min admitted. "No, it does not. Trust is always a risk," Sujin said. "But the bigger risk is letting fear keep you from recognizing genuine friendship when it is offered." As the hours passed, more amazing revelations emerged from casual conversations. The Vorthak had developed medical techniques that could regrow lost limbs. Their agricultural methods could make any world fertile. Their construction techniques could build cities that would survive the heat death of the universe. But they also had simpler gifts to offer. Kritok had brought seeds from dozens of worlds, hoping to trade them for earth flowers. Shiara had learned to create music using gravitational waves, and she eagerly demonstrated songs that made the crystal flowers chime in harmony. Taeho made perhaps the most important discovery of the day when he was reviewing the memory crystal, data that Kritok had provided. "Speaker Hyun-woo," he called out excitedly, "you need to see this!" The crystal contained not just records of Vorthak encounters with other species, but detailed analyses of galactic civilization patterns. The Vorthak had been studying everyone, not just humans. "They have solutions to problems we have not even identified yet," Taeho explained. "Trade route optimizations that could reduce shipping costs by 60%. Communication protocols that could eliminate translation errors between species. Even social structures that could prevent the kind of misunderstandings that led to our conflict. They have been preparing to help the galaxy for centuries," Hyun-woo realized. They were just waiting for someone to give them a chance. As the day moved toward evening, the atmosphere in the chamber had completely transformed. What had begun with terror and the expectation of death had become something like a family reunion. Delegates were sharing stories, comparing cultures, making plans for future cooperation. The moment that would be remembered in history books happened when the Florian delegate, overcome with emotion, began to release pheromones of pure joy and gratitude. The chemical signals triggered similar responses in other plant-based species present, creating a cascade of happiness that filled the air with the scent of blooming flowers. Shiara, delighted by the sudden garden aroma, began to dance. Her movements were the interpretive philosophy that Sujin had described, but simplified for a child's understanding. She was dancing the concept of new friendships growing like flowers after a long winter. Other delegates began to join her, each adding movements from their own cultures. The insectoid kithara clicked in rhythm. The silicon beings chimed like wind chimes. Even the dignified water-dwellers began to pulse with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of celebration. At the center of it all, Kritok and Sujin stood side by side, watching their two species take the first steps toward understanding each other. "How did you know?" Hyun-woo asked Sujin during a quiet moment. How did you know that helping him during the storm would lead to all this? Sujin smiled. I did not know. I just saw someone who needed help, and I helped. That is what humans do. That is what humans do, Kritok agreed, his translated voice filled with wonder. That is what we want to learn to do. 6 months later, the first joint human Vorthak research station was established in orbit around Earth. The station's gardens, tended by both species working together, contained flowers from every world in the galaxy. A year after that, the first mixed colony ship launched toward unexplored space. Aboard were human families, Vorthak families, and volunteers from dozens of other species, all united by the understanding that the universe was vast enough for everyone. The ship's garden, designed by Shi'ara and maintained by human children, was considered one of the most beautiful sights in known space. But perhaps the most important change was the one that happened in schools across human space. Children now learned about the Vorthak not as monsters, but as the gentle giants who had spent centuries waiting patiently for humanity to overcome its fear and accept their friendship. And in Vorthak schools, children learned about humans as the small, fierce ones who had taught the galaxy that true strength came not from claws or armor, but from the willingness to extend a hand to a stranger in need. The galaxy had learned its most important lesson. Sometimes the most fearsome monsters make the most loyal friends, and sometimes it takes a human to show everyone else how to look past appearances and see the heart that beats underneath. As Sujin often said in the speeches she gave at the many diplomatic ceremonies that followed, we expected a monster. Instead, we found a mirror that showed us who we could become. The universe was a much brighter place when people stopped being afraid of each other and started being curious instead. And in gardens across 1,000 worlds, human and Vorthak, children played together among flowers that sang with the music of friendship.